Neighbor Hoodlums. Today our mini lecture is on Manifest Destiny. We're going to focus on some, essential items with this regard to this term, the spirit of expansion in the antebellum period, because it is a root cause of the American Civil War and is going to lead to many of those things that you did your last assignment on about government actions during the antebellum period, primarily in respect to slavery. So we'll get started on this. We'll give you a quick overview so you can set up your notes. What are the key things that you're going to be that we're going to be covering today? First, we'll define Manifest Destiny and its origins, where it came from. We'll look over some key themes that is found in Manifest Destiny, sort of writing, literature, art. We will look at the historical context of westward expansion. This is kind of the previously on The Walking Dead sort of information. Then we'll look at some key stages and events that led to that tension in the antebellum period. Also, none more important probably than the war with Mexico. We're not going to cover the war itself so much as we'll cover the result of that war and how that led to, again, expanding those debates and entrenching both North and South in their views on slavery. And that is what our last topic is then, the issue of slavery and how it's connected to Manifest Destiny. So let's begin with the origins of Manifest Destiny. And this term was coined by John O'Sullivan in 1844 when he wrote an essay called Annexation about absorbing Texas and annexing it into the United States, advocating for that. O'Sullivan was a expansionist. He used the term again in the following year in the New York Morning News in reference to settling the Oregon issue with Great Britain. So O'Sullivan himself was an expansionist, and when he coined this term, he's capturing this spirit of expansion that had existed for a very, very long time in the United States, going all the way back to the early colonial period. And in it, he describes with that term Manifest Destiny, manifest meaning apparent and destiny meaning inevitable. And so that he was saying that it was an obvious and apparent and it was inevitable that America would expand from sea to shining sea. It's also important that you know that it is a description of a trend. It's not a government policy. He's just describing, like many historians do, when we look back and start studying things, we give names to these trends, like the market revolution. Nobody called it the market revolution at the time. That is kind of an after the fact sort of term that we label these trends with. And it's important to know that not everyone subscribed to this perspective. There were people who opposed expansionism at even a very, very early time. The key themes that we'll discuss very quickly were outlined by a historian, William Weeks. He's a professor of history at San Diego State, and he wrote a book called Building a Continental Empire in 1996. And in that book, he examines a lot of documentation in his study of history, and he finds three themes that seem to run through almost all of it. And in it, as a matter of fact, Weeks even contends that really westward expansion and British limits on expansion, you think the Proclamation of 1763 was one of the root causes of the American Revolution. Now, you may agree or disagree with that. It certainly is a factor, but whether it was foundational, like Weeks says, is open for debate. But the first of those themes is the virtue of the American people, their institutions. This is that example of that term, that concept of American exceptionalism that emerged at the birth of the United States. And some people would say it had roots all the way back to its Puritan days with John Winthrop's City on a Hill speech. And Thomas Paine in Common Sense, they both refer to making the world over again in this model of American exceptionalism. So this first one, the virtue of the American people, their institutions, to summarize, it is America and Americans are awesome. The second one is that it is a mission to spread it. If America's awesome, why don't we make the world awesome too by making it more America. Right? So this mission to spread these institutions, remaking the world. Now, this third one is a significant one because it also implies that it is by providence and that it's ordained by God that we spread from sea to shining sea. And that is a powerful motivation. In addition, it kind of makes do whatever is necessary. It frees you up from any sort of moral compunction against expansion and what it may lead you to do. So it's a very powerful idea. It's a very powerful idea indeed. Not only in literature, but you'll find that and we're not going to focus on this, but you'll find that this idea of manifest destiny finds its way even into art. And this is an example of the Hudson Rivers School of Art, which gets more attention in AP exams than I would ever predict. But this one by Albert Bierstadt in 1869 is Emigrants Crossing the Plains. It is an artistic rendition, it's very typical, that captures the spirit of American exceptionalism and the grandeur of the American continent. And again, I'm not going to go into that too detailed, but this idea of American romanticism and the focus on the individual and emotional, and the themes of discovery and exploration and settlement. And this is typical of the style. None is more significant probably or more well known than this one. And this is American Progress by John Gass. And it is ironically a very literal, well, not ironic, but paradoxical. It is a literal symbolic representation of manifest destiny. And we'll have you analyze this a little bit later. But and one of the things to do is if you look at all the symbolism in here, again, it fits very well with this idea of manifest destiny and with William Weeks's three themes as well. I will give you a clue as far as the central figure. A lot of people misunderstand who that is. And if you focus, I'm not going to tell you, but if you focus what's in her hands, in particular the book in her hand, and if you look at her forehead, it might give you a clue as to who that is. To provide some historical context for the westward expansion, America's had a long history of that, up to the Revolution, even when westward expansion, moving to the frontier and crossing the Appalachians. But as we talk about the United States itself, the first major territorial acquisition was the Louisiana Purchase, a very Jeffersonian ideal. And even though he was conscience-ridden by the decision to do so with his political views, his economic and views of the future of America for the American yeoman farmer would have been met very well by this purchase, which doubled the size of the United States at the time. And so this is the first major land acquisition, and again is going to bring up that issue. And the reason I'm showing you the Missouri Compromise is the territory, as it starts to add in states, it starts to have the debate about expansion of slavery into the territories. Should new states have slavery or not? And this will be resolved. If you remember back to the Missouri Compromise reading you did with John Quincy Adams in his discussion with Secretary of War John C. Calhoun, and it brought up this issue of slavery, that they were talking about the Missouri Compromise, but it devolved into a debate on slavery. And the Missouri Compromise tends to temporarily solve this problem. But if you look at the map itself, you're going to see there's a distinct problem for Southerners as they're struggling to maintain a balance of power in the Senate. They know they've lost the House of Representatives because the population of the North is so great. And so they have a political advantage in the House of Representatives. But they know that if they can maintain a balance of power in the Senate, if they can control the Senate, they can block any anti-slavery issues. So it is very important to the South to maintain that balance of power. And if you look at the map right here, what you're seeing is that there is a great advantage to the North. That up north of 3630, there's a lot of room for northern states, which means adding senators for the North, which are anti-slavery. So they know they must expand or die, that the South's institution of slavery will die and wither if it does not spread westward and gain territory. So that takes us to our stages of growth. That's where our next spot is. And this is the United States as it existed in 1844, prior to these new territorial expansions. If you notice the big white area there, that is all kind of looked at with expansionists, kind of with envy in their eyes as they look to acquire it. And this is why you see Southern expansionists looking to the West for their salvation. And what you will also notice is that the territory that we have, if you notice here, actually the South has the advantage in slaves in the Senate with a couple extra states, which is good for them. Northerners don't have to fear the South's Senate because they have the House of Representatives that they control. So, with regard to the issue of slavery, but you're going to see that these territories here, this is the way things exist in 1844. This is a map showing all the territorial acquisitions, and the part that we're going to focus on are these three areas. There's Texas, and we're going to go up to what is known as the Oregon Territory, and then down here to the Mexican Cession is the result of the war with Mexico. Then there's this area here called the Gadsden Purchase, and more on that later. So this is the way things exist, and these are the three areas that we're going to cover during this next spot. The first of those tensions rises in the annexation of Texas. Texas, check that out. Look at that shape, huh? After the war for independence against Mexico, think of, remember, the Alamo. After their war for Texas independence, they formed the Lone Star Republic. Now, Texas believes their territory is not only this yellow area here, but this green area all the way around the Rio Grande and then in this northern kind of offshoot. Texas sees that's what Texas is. Mexico believes that this is the only area that is Texas. And so that this disputed territory is going to be the result. It's going to have a fair amount of to say when we create the Mexican War. This disputed territory is going to be an issue. Then there is the Oregon issue, and this was another Polk, James Polk. I would recommend that all of you check out the James Polk clip on the President series, as it will explain a lot of this, and this what could have been a major military and disaster for the United States. Well, disaster might be too strong, but a conflict with Great Britain. It was resolved peacefully at the 49th parallel when both countries agreed that that would be the difference between British Canada and the United States. Minnesota is the only part of the lower 48 that actually extends into above the 49th parallel, that little bump at the top of Minnesota's head. But the area that is really going to be the root for most of this turmoil is going to be Mexico and the war with Mexico and what's known as the Mexican Cession. So we go to war under, we could debate a lot of things about the war with Mexico, or it's a whole nother discussion, whole nother lecture, about the war with Mexico. Primarily, it was done. The war was we engaged in the war to get California. We offered to buy it first. Mexico refused, obviously, and so Polk, most historians agree that he provoked a war with Mexico so that he could conquer it and take it. And I think we could argue a lot of things. Was the war just or right or wrong? We could talk about that. We could talk about the advantages of gaining that territory. Would America be good or great? In other words, would we be virtuous or powerful? We could talk about all of those things. But our topic today is primarily kind of the results of this war with Mexico. Once the war is over, we gain the territory known as the Mexican Cession, and that is the dark or the grayish area right here. That is we gain, and we purchase this a little bit later. But the Mexican Cession and much of this territory over here is going to raise again that issue of slavery in the territories that was settled originally by the Missouri Compromise. This we call it the seeds of discord. Many historians compare it to the Trojan War and the story of the golden apple of Hesperides, the judgment of Paris. If you're a Greek mythology person, maybe to put it simply, it's a little bit like the Trojan horse. It is something that we thought to be, that was going to be this great boon for our country. And then we brought it into our gates, and at night the Greeks poured out of the belly of this large wooden horse, opened up the gates, and led to the ruin of Troy. And some people would make the comparison that the war with Mexico did the same thing, that we got this territory, we brought it into the country, and once we had it in the country, it led to an explosion, a series of events that led to a civil war that would be the deadliest in American history. And because what it did was it raised this ugly debate about whether slavery should exist. And as you'll see, it starts immediately. The debate begins immediately. That after the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo gives us this land, um, David Wilmot, a member of Congress, suggested what was known as the Wilmot Proviso. Now, what David Wilmot suggested was that any territory gained from the war with Mexico be slavery free, that no slavery should be allowed in those territories. Now, even though that was promptly shot down by Southerners in the Senate, to them, it betrayed the North's true intent, and that was to eliminate slavery. That unlike what they had thought in the past, that the North was hell-bent on eliminating that institution and their way of life. And that was completely unacceptable. And what it did was it made Southerners dig in their heels and really resistant to compromise. Additionally, they would try to put in things in place that would preserve this institution of slavery for eternity. There were even suggestions that they take all of Mexico, that even take Cuba, so that they would have more southern states to add that would preserve this institution of slavery. Now, in these debates, then the North dug in as well. You have a rising sense of abolitionism that emerged during this time. You think William Lloyd Garrison here. But what it does, it leads to a series of events, many of which you kind of researched in your last assignment. And it led to things like the notion of popular sovereignty, which would roll back the Missouri Compromise, the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which would be its legal manifestation. It would lead to Bleeding Kansas and a little mini civil war right here in the state of Kansas. It would lead to the Lecompton Constitution. It would lead to the Dred Scott case. So all of these are rooted in this westward expansion, this manifest destiny, and the Mexican Cession. So that's kind of the connection there that we will start to examine, and we will look at this very briefly in class. Feel free, if you have questions, to ask them. And I hope your understanding of manifest destiny and its connection to the Civil War is a little more clear now.